Welcome to PM Untold, Unlocking the Path to Success. This podcast unravels the hidden stories behind exceptional leadership to excel in your own leadership endeavors. Brought to you by the collaboration of PMI Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Subscribe to PM Untold today and join us as we redefine leadership one story at a time.
Welcome to PM Untold. I am Felisberto and I'll be your host today. I am a project manager in the banking sector and volunteer member in the Luxembourg PMI chapter. I'm very pleased to present our guest, Dr. Elissa Farrow. Dr. Elissa is a futurist, author, facilitator, coach, and strategist. She has over 25 years of experience in research, organizational innovation, design, adaptation, and assurance. Dr. Elissa has guided organizations to define positive futures and then successfully transform to bring lasting benefits. She is an experienced board director and has held global leadership positions with the Change Management Institute. Dr. Elissa is an adjunct fellow at the University of the Sunshine Coast. She has won a national award for contributing to women in project management through the Project Management Institute, Australia, and for her research with the Association of Professional Futurists and Change Management Institute. So welcome, Dr. Elissa, to PM Untold.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me.
We are very glad to have you here. So starting to introduction of yourself, could you please tell the audience more about yourself and your background?
Sure. My original background is social science. It's what I studied. I grew up in a small town on the coast of Eastern Australia. And for me, a lot of my early work was involved with working with young people who were considered to be at risk or on the fringes. And I felt very attracted to learn more about how I could change the systemic blocks and impacts to give young people a greater opportunity. So my social science background means that I've got a strong social justice element as part of my background. It also led me into working in the fields of domestic and family violence prevention, where I managed my first project, actually, which was a statewide event for the Queensland government in those days called DV Prevention Week. It's now DV, or Domestic Violence Prevention Month, as a whole month of action around reducing gender-based violence. But that was my first project. I have worked in government. I've had a small consultancy company working with non-profit organisations as well as for-profit organisations, and came across this podcast and a number of your contributors at the recent Benelux conference in Eindhoven in the Netherlands in September.
Thank you, Dr. Elissa. Indeed, a very enlightening and makes sense now. But my next question is, what got you into the project management world?
The main thing that got me into the project management world was the desire to enact change. Change in the community was where I started, and the concept of projects and project management was something for me that meant that we could work together to achieve great things. In those days, when I first started, the terminology around benefits management wasn't such a big part of our vocabulary. In the old days, it used to be about, well, what are the outcomes that we're looking to achieve through the various projects that I worked on. I also got to have a greater appreciation for projects through my work as a change manager and change strategist, and also as a portfolio director of an enterprise portfolio management office, where my team was responsible for not only the maturity of project management disciplines, including program management, change management, and benefits management, but also supporting people to uplift their personal capacity and sponsors' ability to make wise and good investment decisions as well. So that's a bit about what got me into the PM world, wanting to enact change.
In picking up on this, so Where does your inspiration come from?
My inspiration comes from very innate, I think, part of myself that forever that I can remember. I've always been someone that was not sort of necessarily dissatisfied with the way things were happening, but a strong sense of social justice. And so, way back in the early days, I'd often be part of a volunteering group, or I'd start to come across topics that I thought there's got to be a better way of doing this. And so my inspiration comes from wanting to leave the world a better place, which is a bit of a t-shirt slogan, I think. But for me, it's actually how I've lived my life, right from when I was a teenager and first started my volunteer positions. And now I love seeing the fact that I can share my thoughts, I can coach, guide, and mentor others, and see projects and the outcomes of those projects actually making a tangible difference to people on the ground.
That's a very good inspiration, actually, and I totally agree with you.
Mm.
So going to the part of the human side of project manager, which is now make very sense about with your background. So in a project, the project manager faces multiple challenges beyond the scope, budget, schedule. So in all
Mm-hmm.
projects, a project manager needs uh, to manage also the human component. That it's not always straightforward, so straightforward and simple. Could you please share with our audience your view of the human side in project management and what includes?
Yeah, it for me is the key to any successful project is being able to harness not only the technical capacity but also the human capacity, because we won't be able to achieve any benefits or real lasting sustainable change if we don't get people to change their hearts and their minds and their behaviors. And so for me, from a project management perspective, the human side is way more than stakeholder management as one of our core PMBOK competency areas. For me, it's also about the concept of how we can lead a often dispersed or maybe even diverse group of project team members and other stakeholders together towards the same direction. And to do that, we need to listen, we need to involve people, we need to be able to facilitate. Sometimes we need to negotiate and deal with some of the conflicts that might arise as well. And certainly from a human side in project management, it's also making sure that, especially if there's a big change impact, that people are looked after through the change process. And by looked after, for me, it doesn't mean that they've lost their agency through the process, but it means that hopefully they'll have a part to play in that project, even in terms of contributing to the design of the outputs and new capabilities that we're wanting to develop. But a project manager and project leaders who are in sponsorship position being able to harness that team, but also listen to the voice of the customer. So it sort of extends it way beyond time, cost, quality, and other standard performance metrics to be something that if we don't have the people working together and believing in the vision, it's going to be really hard to have a successful project. And that's been proven in research and my research, as well as just everyday practice.
Yes, and I guess it's what makes the difference of a project manager that could accomplish more successful projects. So among everything that you mentioned, also team building and integration is crucial to a project success. Uh, in your view, how can a project manager help the team to adopt a common focus to accomplish the required objectives quickly and efficient? And if you have any stories to share with us.
Certainly, there's a few good stories of how to and how not to do that I've experienced in my professional career. For me, the PM, a really good PM, needs to realise that in some circumstances, unless you've got a rolling team that goes from project to project that knows each other well, we go through standard team formation activities. So the project manager very quickly needs to be able to understand the individual strengths of team members and then set that team up for success in terms of how we wish to collaborate, work with each other, negotiate, and deal with the issues that, of course, will arrive within a project context. So one of the things that I like doing as part of any project that I'm part of, or certainly when I'm coaching project managers or project leaders, is to say, let's start with having a set of principles. It could be in the form of a team charter that we form as a sort of almost like a team forming process about our agreed ways of working with each other. And these aren't, necessarily follow the methodology. This is like, if these things happen, what are we going to do? What's our commitment to each other? And what's the commitment to resolving these challenges? In one organisation that I worked with, that wasn't in place. And my role in that particular program, which was close to $7 billion in value. It was a very significant government initiative. There was some behaviour that was in that team that was really not safe. And one of the things that I like to talk about, and I spoke at the recent Benelux conference, was about this notion of a leader creating psychological safety. In that team, it wasn't safe for people to share ideas or give and get feedback, and it actually eroded the trust in the project director who was there at the time, and it also created the climate of the team, or that team culture wasn't feeling very productive, and it actually affected people's confidence to come to work, but also provided for people some challenges for their mental and physical health. So one of the things that I supported in that team context to do was actually start to understand what psychological safety would be within a project context, and the fact that we've got a pretty important role to be aware of what that actually means. Essentially, we want the leader of the team to create a climate in that team where people can openly ask questions, they can admit mistakes without fear of repercussions, and they can also ask for help. And if we can create an environment like that with appropriate feedback and some agreed ways of doing things, I've seen that happen and improve team-based performance. And I've also seen it actually create a really nice environment to work in when projects, as we know, aren't easy. Like then if projects were easy, probably none of us would want to do them. We want a bit of challenge. We want a bit of complexity. But if we can do that in a collegiate way where we feel safe to question, it will certainly improve our ability to adopt that common focus and a common set of objectives.
Thank you. Indeed, very all very common and important facts. Indeed, it's it's key to have a good environment to work, not only on project management, but everywhere. But
exactly.
Talking about the things that you mentioned, also about resilience of a team. How does the team members' resilience affect success of a project?
I think it's resilience is quite a personal process. Like resilience for me is that ability to adapt and to respond when things change. So it's not necessarily the concept of agility, but agility is part of resilience, I think, or the ability to bounce back when things get really tough. I've seen in projects some of the stories, another project that I did in a non-profit context where that particular organisation were working very strongly with people who had lived experience of domestic and family violence. So they were part of a core co-design team looking at a future service delivery response. That bunch of people that we worked with were incredibly resilient. They'd survived all sorts of very terrible processes in their personal lives. So we're very resilient, but they also were able to acknowledge that there were times when they did need to ask for help, they did need to ask for a pause, and they also wanted to make sure that whoever was facilitating those co-design processes were respectful and gave space for people to express their feelings in a way that was important to them. I've seen resilience also happen on the reverse, where a project has perhaps been going on for some time. It's prone to having many problems, and the team are exhausted. They're physically, mentally exhausted. They're already starting to check the jobs online to see if there's other options for them. You might even see churn. And so for me, that's part of resilience, is creating an environment that is aware of where staff members are at. And if staff members who will come from all sorts of different scales of resilience need a little bit of extra support, that we're cognizant to that and we respond in an appropriate manner, and don't just keep on. The old saying was like, keep on hitting, the process, flogging the horse was what they said, which isn't a nice term for me as someone who loves animals and doesn't like that statement. But it's that metaphor of why are we doing this to each other, when really what might be best for the project is to actually take a deliberate pause, if appropriate to do so, close the project if it's really not working, or reset that process, considering not only the economic costs but also the personal strain on staff members who we care for.
That's very interesting. Well, several facts, and as you mentioned, resilience is a personal way journey. So, but how can a project manager help to build in a team resilience for the team members?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's talking about it, and actually talking about it as a concept, which is normally not on an agenda for a team meeting. We don't say, how are you feeling, or how's our level of resilience, or even how's our sense of energy that we have as a team. And so for me, to build the team members' resilience is also appropriate learning and development activities within the time limitations that we have, and also the ability to have opportunities for genuine connection. It might be occasional team social related events, and it's also being able to at times talk about non-project orientated things, to make sure that we see the person not just as a project resource but as a whole person. And for me, when I approach projects that way, and I see other colleagues of mine that I respect greatly who are excellent project leaders and sponsors, that's what they do. They look beyond just the person being a resource, but actually that they're a person who might have a family at home, who might have a sick family member, who might have just had an accident and are struggling a little bit. When things happen outside of work, that's when our resilience at work will go down as well. We've got to realize that people aren't just robots.
No, yes, indeed. It's in my experience, it's also very, very important, because if the team is happy, as you said before, the project will succeed for sure. So going a little bit back, as you mentioned, sometimes the project needs to end, and I would like to talk about all the transformation that a project can bring to the table, and sometimes. A lot of times, the stakeholders, the employers, are not ready for that change. So, how can a project manager ensure safety and support for those people to overcome?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say, that for projects that have got a heavy impact on people, on their roles, their livelihood, maybe even them staying within the organisation, having appropriate change management and human resource capacity is critical. I always make sure that if I'm looking at a project, I always include a very early impact analysis about what could happen and who are the stakeholders that might be, let's call them the winners or the losers as part of the process. So for me, a PM needs to be cognizant of the fact that not all stakeholders will be affected the same way. That's a standard stakeholder engagement grid where we have power and influence or interest and impact on a dual dimension map. And we want to realise that not all stakeholders are to be engaged by the same people. We need to customise our stakeholder engagement approach. And we also need to be observant that stakeholders, especially if they're external to our organisation, like customers, for example, of our financial institution or of our or of our service or our industry, they need to be communicated to about what changes are coming, when, how it might actually impact them, and where they can go for some assistance, rectification, or to ask further questions. The standard change kit for me, a project manager, if they don't have a change manager, is about what's the forward plan, when will the impacts potentially come, what is the support we're going to provide people in the form of formal learning, support, coaching, mentoring, just communications in some circumstances, and then where can people go to self-help themselves to get further information. If it's a big change impacting people, I know from an Australian context, many of our businesses here have got employee assistance services. So if someone is really struggling and seeing that it might be quite distressing for them to change, there's appropriate options that people can be referred to for maybe psychological support if necessary.
Okay, it's very, very important topics, actually. I feel that it's almost another podcast, indeed, because it's quite important to think about the well-being. So, so what's your advice and view for a project manager to think about the future and anticipate and ensure the well-being of the stakeholders on the project and the people that are impacted?
Well, part of my doctoral research explored organisations of the future and the implications of artificial intelligence on leaders and teams, and as well as the adaptation approach. And mindset was one of the key elements that I researched. And that AI is a total other podcast, Anna, as well. We can talk about lots of different things. But for me, a project manager needs to realise that the work that we're doing today about enacting change now will actually have a longer term flow and effect. So at the Benelux conference, I was encouraging people to think a bit more like a futurist or longer term foresight specialist, where think more about the decisions we make today will actually have a dramatic effect on the future. So if we can sort of consider stakeholder needs and team needs, not only today, but also in the future, that will definitely help in shaping our forward strategy. It might also affect the design of the products or outputs that we're actually creating if we put it in that more future stated perspective. I think in terms of the readiness for people and the resilience of people connected to that process, we know at the moment globally there's a lot of changes that are happening. There's a lot of people who might be actually concerned about what's happening in the broader geopolitical context at the moment. And so we've got to maybe even activate a little bit more self-care, a little bit more team care right now than maybe what we feel like we've had to in the past. Because the future can be shaped. Project managers are front and center at shaping the future. And from my perspective, it's all about making sure we know what the true implications are and what the benefits are that are positive, and make sure that we try to soften or at least mitigate those more disadvantaged or disbenefits that may emerge from change.
Thank you, Dr. Elissa. Thank you for your answer. So, ending our podcast almost, do you have any closing thoughts to share with our listeners?
One of the areas that I've been investigating lately is the importance of honouring the endings of process I recently wrote a LinkedIn article about it, and welcome any listeners to connect through to me on LinkedIn and ask further questions in this process. But honouring the endings to me is something that in projects we often get to the finish line of a project and we're going, oh, I'm so glad that's finished. And we might not even do a retrospective, or it might be quite a hurried lessons learned process. And for me, what I'm encouraging people to do, especially as we move into 2025 and beyond, is make the beginning and the end of your projects just as meaningful. So the effort that we put in the front end about validating the plan, creating the business case, articulating the benefits is beautiful and wonderful. Delivery, lots of action stations, but let's also honour the ending, because there are so many important lessons that we will get as individual project professionals, but also the organisations that we work with that will be legacy for them, and also things that might even be able to, in the future, shift the body of knowledge in areas that maybe we weren't expecting, such as the current progress around the ESG processes, considering the broader environmental impacts of our projects, but also considering the other two components of our ESG model, the social, the psychologically safe and social elements, and also making sure that we remember who we're serving. And we're serving the people, the customers, the clients of our organisations, and that's where I'll leave it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Elissa, for that last note, which is also very helpful for all project managers for the day-to-day. So thank you very much for joining and sharing your knowledge and experience with our listeners. It was a great pleasure to have you here, and hopefully in the future soon. So listeners, if you like today's topic, you may want to learn more about Dr. Elissa and her work. You will find all the links required in the description area. So thank you for listening us, and until the next episode.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to PM Untold. From groundbreaking innovations to nurturing high-performing teams, we are your go-to resource for mastering leadership. For questions or suggestions, contact us at beneluxpodcast@pmi.lu. Subscribe to PM Untold today as we redefine leadership one story at a time. Stay inspired.